Started. Hello, everybody. My name is Christine Passig from To Be Continued, and I want to welcome you all to tonight's event with the grief guru, Kelli Nielsen. Before turning things over to Kelli, I'd like to share a little bit about our organization, To Be Continued. It's a Minnesota-based 501c3 nonprofit organization founded in 2019. Our mission is to increase awareness of suicide prevention, mental health, and wellness through advocacy, education, and outreach. In addition to community outreach events such as this one, we also offer trainings like Question, Persuade, and Refer, otherwise known as QPR, which is the mental health version of CPR. We are now a designated organization to teach mental health first aid. There are 3 different mental health first aid courses: the adult version, youth mental health first aid for adults who interact with youth, and teen mental health first aid, which is a curriculum taught in schools to an entire grade level, 10th, 11th, or 12th graders. And it's very exciting. We are just beginning to form school-based clubs to empower youth to raise awareness. We host an annual continuing education conference for healthcare providers, nurses, social workers, educators, police officers, and clergy. And during Mental Health Awareness in May, we raise awareness through distribution of yard signs. These are just a few examples of our work. And to learn more, you can visit our website at tobecontinued.org. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try to point to one of these logos. There we go. It's the number 2, the letter B, continued.org. That is our website. While you're there, you can sign up for our newsletter to stay informed about our offerings. You can also find info about our upcoming annual signature fundraising events, Dancing Like the Stars, which is our primary source of funding for this event and much of our programming. We also would like to thank our premier sponsors, Hutchinson Health and Glencoe Regional Health, for helping to make this event possible. As a reminder, To Be Continued does not offer any professional services. This webinar may spark unpleasant emotions. If it becomes overwhelming, please reach out for help. Our website resource page has information about national, regional, and local resources. If you or a loved one is struggling, and we'll put these numbers in the chat so you'll have them, contact the National Lifeline at 1-800-723-8255 or text the word HELP to 741-741. A few housekeeping items while you're here in this webinar: use the chat box to ask questions, and we'll leave about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. After the program, you will receive an 8-question survey. So please take a moment to give us your valuable feedback so we can continue to provide excellent resources and educational opportunities like this one. So now I'd like to introduce tonight's presenter. Kelli Nielsen is a speaker, author, and coach. Her book, You're Not Crazy, You're Grieving, shares the process she used to heal from tremendous loss. She also founded The Grief Guru, a company focused on helping others learn to move forward on purpose, in purpose, and love their lives after loss. Kelli, thank you so much for being here tonight. Welcome. And now I'll turn things over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christine. I am thrilled to be here. And as we were all chiming in our states, I am a Minnesotan by way of Florida. So I made my escape nearly 4 years ago down to sunny Florida, but I'm a Minnesotan at heart. I don't know if any of you noticed when my picture was up that I actually have a loon as part of the logo for the nonprofit organization I started, and it's right here as well. So a lot of people ask what this is, but all of us Minnesotans know this is a loon, and this is a little, homage to my home state where I was born and raised for 40 years. So a couple of things that I would like to ask of you before we get started. Number 1 is be open and ready to learn. I hope that you have pen and paper handy and that you're taking notes, because there's going to be a lot of practical advice and tips, things that you can implement. So I really hope that you have pen and paper handy and you can take some notes. Also, this is a little interesting because I can't see any of your smiling, amazing faces, and I like to be interactive with the audiences I speak with. So I'm going to lean on you guys to really use the chat feature. I want to encourage you to just put whatever comments if you're agreeing with something, if you have a question about something, I'll ask at a couple different times for feedback. So really use that chat button and engage with me. It's much better when we have a conversation instead of just me talking at you. And lastly, as Christine mentioned, we will have some time at the end for questions and answers. So you can either put your question in the chat and we'll keep an eye on that, or write it down and be mindful of it at the end. We'll have some time for Q&A. So with that, I am going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can get going. So this is Advancing Through Adversity. We are going to learn tonight how to take the seasons of adversity in our life and how to use the lessons it affords us to advance us into our next season in life. So, as I mentioned, I was born and raised in Minnesota. It's a far, far away from Florida. I spent my first 40 years of life in Minnesota. I actually grew up in the eastern suburbs of Woodbury, Cottage Grove, that kind of area. So that is where I grew up. I came from a pretty typical Midwest family. Well, kind of typical. Here is our crazy family on a trip, ironically, to Florida. So yeah, this is me with the knife to my throat. Don't mind that. You know, this is my mom, Sharon, and my sister and brother, and my dad, Joe. So I believe is at a Pirates of the Caribbean event down here. And I am the middle of three kids of our Midwestern family. But for me, learning and dealing with grief really started a little over 5 years ago. The morning of February 1st, 2017, my world was shattered. I received a call that morning from my dad letting me know that my mom had taken her life. And, you know, to try to describe what that felt like, it was earth shattering. I just remember yelling no back into the phone and insisting it couldn't be true. You know, I couldn't go to their house right away because the police were still dealing with the scene. And so I sat in my closet really paralyzed by grief and shock and trauma. It took me quite a while to be able to, you know, get my clothes on and eventually go over to my parents' house and try to begin to piece together this nightmare that was my life. Grief really had its way with me. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I know probably several people can relate to some of these things, you know, not being able to concentrate, not being able to focus. I actually had to change jobs because I didn't have the mental capacity to perform in the role that I was in. I just really was struggling. I was just going through the motions of life, and I looked for help. You know, I wish that this organization would have been around when that happened. I looked for help and I couldn't find help. The local police department actually finally referred me to a suicide support group. And it was so comforting when I went to that support group to be surrounded by people who got it, people who understood my pain and what I was going through. But what was disturbing to me is that everyone in that group seemed to be living in the same level of pain that I was living in. And for them, many of the people in that group, it had been several months or even years since they lost their loved one to suicide. And here I was just a couple months after it happened. And I thought, oh my gosh, is this what the rest of my life is going to be like? You know, I began to believe the lie that I would never recover. I began to just kind of concede to this idea that I was just going to be sad and just going through the motions for the rest of my life. And I proceeded to exist like that for several months. Oops, sorry. Let me go back. Oh no, sorry. I was trying to read the chat. That's what I get for multitasking. Christine, I'll leave it to you to read the chat from now on. So I just existed in this kind of going through the motions, sort of zombie-like state. You know, I would go to work and do what I had to do and just abide in that place. But thankfully, I went to an event several months after that where I heard a speaker. And for the first time in my life, I met someone who had been through something even more horrendous than what I was facing. And she had actually recovered. I heard this amazing speaker named Immaculée, who had survived the Rwandan genocide. And she shared with us on stage how she was hid away in a bathroom with 8 other women for 90 days while literally everyone she had ever known was being massacred around her. She shared the horrific details of being afraid for her life day after day and surviving and finally being able to be released from that situation. But most importantly for me, she shared how she went through a recovery process, how she was able to heal from that trauma and that pain, and she was able to forgive the people that killed all the other people. And I saw her on stage and she was full of joy and she was full of life, and she lives in New York and has a couple kids. And it was the first time I saw a real live example of someone who was completely recovered from this, horrendous trauma. And it was a light bulb moment for me. I remember sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, wait, if she can do it, then I can do it. Like, it was the first time that I realized or even considered this idea that recovery could be possible for me. So I decided right then and there at that event that I would recover. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how long it would take. I just knew that it was possible and that I was going to figure it out. And I made up my mind that night that no matter how long it took, I was going to do whatever I needed to do so that I could recover. So I started learning about our bodies and our minds and how our minds work in general, but more importantly, what happens to us when we go through trauma, the things about our hormones and stress hormones and our neurological systems. And I started paying attention to how I felt and what things helped me to feel better and what things didn't help me to feel better. And I just started increasing. It sounds simple, but I really started just increasing the things that were helping me to feel better. And I started to feel, back to myself again. I started to make progress. Finally, after months of being stuck, I started to make progress. And it wasn't a moment too soon that I found this recovery, because just a few months after that, my son died of a drug overdose. I had moved to Florida to pursue an opportunity here with a nonprofit, and we got a call on July 8th of 2018, letting us know that Quentin, my son, had died of a drug overdose. And it was awful, as you can imagine, but we actually found out through social media. His best friend called me and said, asked if I had heard from Quentin that day, and he was very concerned. And I said, well, no, I just spoke to him yesterday, what's wrong? And he said, well, there's somebody posted something and we can't make sense of it. And so he sent me the post, and it was literally a picture of my son, and it said, gone too soon, rest in peace. And the air left my lungs in that moment. I hit the ground, and I remember calling my sister and trying to talk. I don't know how long it took for me to get the words out to her. But we instantly started calling the police. We started calling hospitals. There was about 2.5 hours where we didn't concretely know if this was just a horrible rumor, like a cruel joke. No hospitals had record of him. Police departments that we called didn't have any record of him. So for about 2.5 hours, we didn't really know. In the meantime, we reached out to my daughter, who's here with me in Florida, and her dad came over, and they were trying to piece it together with me. And then finally we got the actual call from the police in Minnesota that they did confirm that he had passed away early that morning from an overdose of Xanax that had been laced with fentanyl. And at that moment, when it was confirmed from the police, I threw the phone across the room and I just screamed, no. I just yelled no. And my daughter was sitting with me, and this will stay with me for forever. The first words my daughter said are, "You're not going anywhere, are you, Mom?" See, because my mom had just taken her own life, my daughter's very first thought was that I was not going to be able to handle this, that the weight of this trauma, the weight of this grief was going to be too much for me to bear, and that I too would take my own life. But thankfully, because I had, really found hope for healing and developed a system for healing with the passing of my mom, I was able to confidently tell my daughter, like, no, I'm not going anywhere. I knew I was going to be able to get through this. I didn't know how long it would take, but I knew that I was going to be able to recover. And that's one thing I want to, one little nugget for you. And I share, especially with parents, trauma is not our fault. These hard, heavy things, these things that are unexpected and certainly undeserved and, just want to sideswipe us and take us out. It's not our fault that trauma happens, but healing absolutely is our responsibility. We have to take personal responsibility for our healing because our children and other family members and people who love and care about us are depending on us to be able to heal from whatever life throws our way, whatever kind of adversity comes our way. So I began to recover from the loss of my son. What I didn't realize is how more efficient, how much faster I was going to be able to move through the grieving process. Because I implemented these things that I learned, I was able to go through grief so much faster. And that's when it occurred to me, this can be learned. These are actual skills that you can develop. These are muscles that you can build. This is a skill set that anybody can learn. And why is nobody teaching this? I really have this compelling feeling after that to say, this needs to be shared with other people. I need to teach people how to do this so that grief doesn't just take people out of the game. So I wrote the book, as Christine said, You're Not Crazy, You're Grieving. I also started a nonprofit in my son's honor to raise awareness around the opioid epidemic. And I'm believing for 300,000 lives to be impacted for good out of this loss of my son's life. That's my hope. That's my intention. And actually, all of you that are hearing this message tonight have now become part of that 300,000 number. We're actually well on the way to our 300,000 number. And I do want to offer for any of you here tonight, if you would like to listen to an audio version of the book. The first half of the book is my story in a bit more detail. And then the second half of the book is the 5-step framework that I'm about to teach you here momentarily. But if you would like to get the audiobook, you can do one of two things. You can go to the website, imnotcrazyimgrieving.com and sign up for it. Or you can shoot a text with your name and email address to the number listed there, 239-977-5331, and we will be happy to send you the audiobook. It actually is me reading the book, so if you care to hear me read the book to you, that is where you can go get it. But the main purpose for tonight is not for you to hear my story. I only share my story to let you know two things. Number one, hopefully you can relate to me in some way. Hopefully you're here because you're wanting tools and help to recover from some sort of loss, trauma, or tragedy, or adversity in your life. And I hope by me sharing a little bit of my story with you, you understand that I have seen my fair share of adversity. And so the tools that I'm about to give you were birthed out of experience and heartache and hand-to-hand combat with grief. And the second reason I really want to share my experience is because I am no different than you. I'm not a counselor. I don't have a PhD. Yes, I've studied and learned a lot about our neurological systems, but I am a regular person. So if I can learn these tools and implement these tools and have amazing results, then this is doable for you. You don't have to go to years and years of schooling in order to apply these tools and have them be beneficial in your life. So let's get to it. Let's take a look at the grief relief process, the roadmap to restoration. And we call it the grief relief process, but this also is the same process for any type of adversity. So whether it is a loss of a loved one, or whether it is, a divorce or loss of job or home, really any kind of loss, the same framework, these same tools are going to work well for you. So for my note takers, here is where you start to take notes. We're going to do a quick overview of the 5-step framework, and then we're going to go a little bit deeper into 3 of the steps. We don't have time to do all 5 of the steps tonight, but we're going to do 3 of the steps. So our first step is what we call map maker. And this is the most important, profound, foundational step. You do not pass go. You do not collect $200 until you do this step. And it also is the step that most people skip. Amazingly enough, most people don't take time to stop and do this step. So in a map maker, you're going to do 2 things. You're going to decide what you believe and decide what you want. Okay, sounds simple. It's not simple, because mostly what we do when hard things happen to us is we react. We react, or we do what we've seen other people do, or we just enact traditions that have been handed down to us, and we don't take the time to be intentional to decide what we believe and what we want. So that is step number one. Step number two is what we call our path protector. And this is really all about aligning your life, every aspect of your life, aligning your life for healing, making sure that everything in your environment, from people to workplace to social media to TV to the food you're eating to what's in your house, that you've looked through everything and really made sure that you set yourself up for success, that you have an environment in place that's going to help you with healing. Step number three is what we call our mindful makeover. And that is really all of the neurology, neuroscience things that I've learned. Our minds are amazing, and our minds are always learning and remembering patterns. And it always is meditating. Whatever you choose to think about is what is becoming a stronger pattern in your mind. And so we really work with people to help them interrupt the hurtful patterns or the patterns that will keep you stuck in trauma, and to build and create new patterns that are healthy, healing, and positive, so that you can literally rewire your brain for health and healing and not to get stuck in that place of trauma. Step four is what we call our community collaborator. Life is a team sport. It's meant to be lived with others. And I can't think of a time, a more pertinent time to have community than when you're grieving. Grief is incredibly hard, and you really need to be surrounded by community, but not just any community, and not all support is created equal. So we really want to look at where is that healthy community? Where are we going to find examples of people that can help us learn how to recover and actually move forward? And then step five is my favorite step. It is what we call our Trailblazer Step. This is where you actually look at the rest of your life going forward and determine, how has this adversity made you a better person, starting with yourself internally and personally? And then how can you use that with an outward focus and be a help or a blessing to people around you? How can you use this painful thing in your past and actually make a difference in the world, in your community, in your family? Fill in the blank. So let's go to step one. So as I mentioned, step one is foundational. You cannot do the other steps if you haven't started with step one. You actually won't be building on anything if you don't take the time to stop and reflect on what you believe and what you want. Now, what you believe may sound simple, but there are a lot of myths around grief and loss. There's a lot of mindsets out there that say you never ever recover from grief. There's a lot of thinking that says, you'll never be happy again, or maybe you believe it's wrong for me to be happy. It's wrong for me to move on. If I move on, it means that I don't love the person that I lost. There's all sorts of these potential lies that could be hanging out in your head. And so to really take time to determine for yourself, what do I believe about this loss? Do I believe that I can recover? Do I believe that it was my fault? Things like that. To take time and contemplate those things and decide for yourself what you believe about this loss. And then secondly, you want to decide, what is it that you want? What is it that you want more than anything going forward? And now all these things that I have listed on the screen are natural things that we could want. It's natural to want answers. It's natural to scream, this isn't fair. I just want what's fair. It's natural to want justice or vengeance or sympathy. Those are all natural things for us, and they're not bad. The question is, in seeking out some of these other things, is it actually hindering your healing? So I'll give you an example in my own life. When my mom passed away, there were a lot of question marks around the circumstances of her passing. And I wanted answers, and I was consumed with wanting answers. And I was calling the police and calling the medical examiner. And, I was angry and I just wanted this. I felt like the system had failed her, and I felt like nobody was being held accountable for the lack of care. And I almost went to the media with it. I mean, I just really was consumed with this, wanting to right this wrong and wanting to get to the bottom of it and get answers. But what I realized is, even though all of that energy felt productive, it felt active, it actually was keeping me from healing. I wasn't moving forward in my healing because I was so consumed with trying to get answers and trying to, kind of expose the way the system had failed my mom. Now, all of this is incredibly personal. I can't begin to tell you what is the right answer for you. All I can do is encourage you to ask questions for yourself. And at what point is seeking answers actually keeping you from healing and moving forward? And at what point, can you recognize that maybe the comfort of sympathy and people telling you, oh, I can't imagine, and sympathizing with you, is that actually helping you to get better, or is that keeping you stuck? This is hard stuff to take a look at, but it's necessary to look at all of these things and to get to a point where you decide, what you want more than anything is to move on, to move forward in your life in a healing and hopeful and healthy way. And once you make that decision, once you decide that that is the thing that you want, it's incredibly, all the other steps will become a lot easier. You'll be able to align your life and make a plan and a roadmap for yourself on how you're going to get to that healing place. But until you've really grappled with these two pieces of information, it's kind of hard to go from there. So for example, when we have a 10-week program we take people through, and the first 5 weeks, the first half of it is focused on this, because this is heavy stuff and it's a place where a lot of people get hung up. So then though, let's move on to step number 2. So step number 2, once you know what you believe and what you want, now you just need to make sure that you have lined up your life for success, that the things that you've identified, you believe and you want, that you're not reading information, you're not listening to people, you're not getting advice from people who aren't in agreement with what you want. So let's say, if you decide that you really want to get healthy and find healing and move forward, but you find that whenever you've talked to this one aunt, she always is just so sad for you. And she's always saying, I just don't know how you get out of bed every day. I can't even imagine. Like I wouldn't be able to get up in the morning. Even though she's well-intentioned, she is actually not helping you to get back to feeling like yourself and being healthy and having energy. It's subtle things like that. We help people look at TV and social media. If you're watching TV and, people use this word triggers, so if there are trigger things for you, whether it be songs or TV or certain things that are going to set you back and upset you, and, you're going to have to reclaim your focus, well, you can remove those things. This is you taking control of your own environment and your own healing. So for example, with my son, when he first passed away, there's about a dozen songs that really remind me of Quentin for whatever reason. And when he first passed away and I'd be listening to music, listening to my playlist, one of those songs would come on and I would just cry, and I'd have to take time and regather myself and my composure. So for a little bit, I removed all those songs from my playlist, because at that time I was just contending for my peace. I was contending to have a day where I didn't cry, right? To find energy, to get out of bed, to have the courage to face situations. So I needed to have my own composure and my own stability before I could deal with those songs showing up in my playlist. And I didn't make room for those things to hijack my emotions throughout the day. Now, as time went on, and I, number one, learned how to control my thinking and my emotions more by practicing these skills. And also, as more time went on and I began to get healed, I could reintroduce those songs. So when I work with people, I really recommend to come up with a plan for this for 3 months, right? So it's another key factor when it comes to adversity and recovering from grief and loss, is that everything happens in a season. It's a season, not a sentence. So you will move through this, things will change. So you want to be patient and flexible with yourself and do what's best for you right now. Take some time to consider what is the best for you right now. And then in 3 months' time, revisit it. You may find that these things change over time. And if you're actively working at it and healing, they will change over time. I actually now have a Quentin playlist on my, in my phone and on my music list. And I listen to it often when I want to think of him. And it's a happy thing. I can listen to those songs and it's not sad anymore. So this is step 2, really looking at everything. And I do want to say, people is a huge category, your coworkers, your friends, your family. Not everyone is equipped to be a good support to you when you're going through loss. Not everyone has the emotional capacity to be able to be empathetic and to really be supportive in the way that you need it. And that is a tough pill to swallow, but that's just the truth of it. So you really have to pay attention to who are those safe people? What are the safe places for support for you and conversations? And who are the people that, best intentions, but they maybe unknowingly are insensitive or unkind or say something that just isn't well thought through. You just want to make a mental note and put a little bit of barrier and limit on it. I want to also encourage you that putting boundaries in place and taking care of yourself is the most responsible thing that you can do. It's not selfish, it's necessary. I often equate going through grief or loss like having a major surgery or going through a major car accident, and you need to treat it as such. You've been through a major trauma. And for a season, for a time of healing, you're going to have to adjust your life. You're not going to be able to just run back at life. You're going to have to make some accommodations to make room for this healing process. But eventually, you'll get back to a place of strength and wholeness. But you really do need to kind of 360 all the way around, make adjustments. And people who love you, people who care about you will understand that. If you just communicate, hey, I'm just really working on my mental health, my recovery, my peace right now. And so I really just need some space, or this is what I need to just learn to be an advocate for yourself throughout this process. And now I believe we're skipping. Yes. So for the sake of time, we are skipping to step 5, which is my favorite step, because step 5 is the step that you will do for the rest of your life. It is this kind of metamorphosis of taking this painful thing, this thing you didn't ask for, this thing that hurt you tremendously, this thing, that maybe you thought was going to wipe you out at times, this really painful thing. And we're going to do 2 things. The first is we're going to take a look at how we have been changed for the good because of this. Now, I'm not saying that the loss was good or that we wanted it to happen or any of that, but we can recognize that we have become a different person. That's one thing I agree with. Everybody says, experiencing loss will change you. 100% it changes you. I would like to say you get to choose if it changes you for the better or for the worse. And I know that I've been changed for the better in countless ways. For example, I am a much better parent. I'm a much more we were on step 5, where we are recognizing the ways that we have been changed by this loss and adversity. And one simple way is just recognizing the strength that we have. I think most of us, when we've gone through a sudden or traumatic loss, we didn't anticipate that, and we couldn't even imagine that we could survive something like that. But, oh, lights are coming on now. But we did. And so even the perseverance and the inner resilience and the strength, and discovering that you have that strength, is one of the ways that you're changed. I know for a lot of people, myself included, radical clarity can come after times of adversity and trauma, really discovering what's important to you in life and what you want out of your life. I know, after my son passed, especially, I knew that I was going to do this work and that I felt really called to it. And I've never been more clear in my life than after that. And again, I don't appreciate the reason for the clarity, but I am thankful for the clarity. And so that's something that people can recognize and value. Another thing is just, family relationships, I know I'm way more flexible and patient and kind with myself and with others. Oh my gosh, this light is just flickering. So recognizing those things are all ways that you've been made better by the loss or adversity. And so you want to take stock of that, right? Because it helps us to not just equate this thing as 100% bad. It was a hard, painful thing, and all of us would wish for a different outcome, but nothing is all good or all bad. And so when we can scrape out the good out of even a bad situation, it helps to take the sting away from the loss. And it also helps to empower us and encourage us that we can go on and make a significant difference and live a significant life, a rich, rewarding life that we love to live. So it's a very important part of this process. And it all culminates with the second part of step 5, which is taking this thing and determining how you can use it to help other people. I just firmly believe that we're all here. We're all wired to contribute. We're all wired to make a difference. It's so fundamental to who we are as people to want to add value and create impact, even if it's something as simple as just being a good friend for someone else who goes through loss. Once you go through loss, it's kind of this club, right? That you don't really get it until you've gone through it. And so now that you've gone through it, if somebody else in your life experiences loss, you can be there for them in a very real, tangible way. And that in and of itself is powerful. My cousin just recently, she's in her mid-30s and lost her husband, right? And so I'm able to be there and support her in a way that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And that really is a gift to be able to do that for other people. And it's very rewarding, whether you end up doing anything professionally with it or not. But I also know that so many inventions, organizations, missions have been birthed out of trauma and pain. And so for a lot of people, there are those things inside of you. I wrote this book. That's how, To Be Continued was founded, based on the heels of tremendous heartache and trauma and tragedy. And look at the impact that it's making. Look at the lives that are being touched. Look at the people that are being helped because of somebody's decision to want to do something significant in honor and remembrance of the person they lost. And, I think about Immaculate and her sharing her story. And she could have, and maybe, she had every right to just live her happy life. She did the hard work of recovering from trauma, and she could have just lived a quiet, happy life. But I'm so thankful that she decided to share her story, that she decided to pay it forward and want to help other people, because I don't know where I would be if I hadn't heard her story. And that's the opportunity that it lies before all of us. When we face adversity or hardship, it's a time to pause and reflect and consider, what could I use this for? How could I flip it on its head and actually make this really hard thing become a blessing or become something good in the earth and in the world? And, when I work with people, that's the part where they start to get excited for living again, right? We're not just about looking backwards and feeling the pain of the loss, but we're reinventing how this loss can serve other people. And to be able to do that is really powerful, really rewarding. And it's what helps a lot of people, myself included, be excited to wake up every day and to go do something significant. And so for any of you that are here and watching and have been through a hard time, I really encourage you to think for yourself what that might look like. Maybe it's starting a scholarship fund. Maybe it's volunteering at an organization. Maybe it's starting an organization. There are infinite possibilities on how you can take this tough thing and turn it for good. And I will tell you that that is where tremendous lasting healing exists, and not just healing, but joy for your life and joy for living. So I really do encourage all of you to do that. And I believe if we had the last slide, I would just leave you with that question. Like, what is your plan what is one thing that you can do to take this pain and turn it into purpose? How are you going to use your pain and turn it into purpose in your future seasons? Because I am here cheering you on every step of the way. And I am personally so excited to see all the amazing things that come out of people's heartache and trauma that have happened over these last few years. There's definitely a season of healing in front of us, but I think on the heels of that, there's a season of massive innovation and massive connectivity and unity. I think that some really remarkable things are going to come on the other side of this. So thank you so much for having me. I will be here now. If we have any questions and answers, I'd love to answer any specific questions you might have.
Can you see the chat, Kelly, or do you want me to read questions?
Yeah, if you could, I can't see the chat. If you could, if there's anything in the chat.
Any questions from anybody? Just go ahead and type them in the chat box. What kind of things did you find helpful, Kelly?
What kind of things? What kind of things did I find helpful? Well, I found one of the biggest things that I found helpful was to take time every morning and to decide for myself how I wanted that day to go. And actually, one of the things I encourage people to do are to come up with some sentences to meditate on every morning. Our minds are really fascinating. And if we don't give our minds anything to think about, it'll think about all kinds of things. But if you will tell your mind what you want it to focus on, a little nugget here, it actually takes 21 days for a thought to be implanted, to be kind of take root. And it takes 63 days for that thought to become automatic, to become a habit. So if you're struggling with, feeling really heavy and feeling really sad, if you can just come up with a handful of sentences to focus on every morning, like I will recover from this, or I am recovering every day. My loved one isn't here physically, but they're here with me in spirit and memories, whatever is true for you. If you'll say that every morning, it actually will help tremendously with your mood and with your concentration. It also will help when those waves of grief want to attack you, because your mind has already got the answer that you've been telling it every morning. And so it's pretty powerful, actually. Grief will come in and you'll find yourself, without even thinking about it, responding back with these positive statements. So that is something I would really recommend for everyone, is to take some time in the morning and think about and write down and repeat some statements that you're intentionally choosing to think about, so that the grief isn't as intrusive or disruptive.
Thank you. Now, while To Be Continued isn't necessarily a faith-based nonprofit, we do have somebody asking about how your faith had changed during your grieving process. Do you touch on that in your book, or is there another place that people could go to read about that story, that part of your story?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do talk about that a bit in my book. So certainly if you get the audio book, and there's on my YouTube channel, we talk about some things related to faith there as well. But I will just say, like, regardless of your faith, I do think that when you go through loss, it's a time that a lot of people question their faith and their mortality and questions of afterlife. So it's very natural, whether you came from a faith-based place before this happened, or maybe you didn't, and now you're like questioning those things. It's very natural to have questions and be looking for answers around those types of things after loss. And so I just encourage you, whatever your practice or faith is to seek out support and help, because you absolutely should grapple with those things and find answers for yourself.
We have somebody asking about your publishing process, if you were self-published or did you find a publisher?
Yeah, I actually self-published through Amazon, so Kindle Direct Publishing. The process of writing my book, I just went for a walk every day and told my story. I just recorded it into my phone. And so I imagined I was sitting across the table from any one of you, and how would I tell you my story? And that's what I did. So I started writing the book on my son's birthday, which is October 21st. And I had a goal to release it by my birthday, which is February 16th. And I was able to do that. So it was kind of this however many months that is, for a 4-month process of dictating my book and editing and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, so that's another thing. Like, we need to hear more stories of loss and heartache and hope and healing. And so I encourage you, if you've experienced loss, share your story. You never know who it will impact and how it might help people. And I think that we don't, we're so weird when it comes to grief as a culture. We're not good at talking about it. We're not good at sharing. It's kind of this taboo elephant in the room sort of thing. So the more stories that we can share, and the more people that can read it and say, oh my gosh, I feel that way too, or I understand, it's just better for everybody. So I highly encourage, if that's all on your heart, explore writing a book for sure.
Okay, another question. What resources or books were most helpful to learn about the brain and the mind and how to change your mindset?
Yeah, oh my gosh, I've read so many books. But Dr. Carolyn Leaf is one of the main ones that I've read a lot of her books. So she is a neuroscientist. She's been studying the field for 30 years, and she really was one of the pioneers behind the idea of neuroplasticity. They used to think that our brains were just fixed and that they never changed, but now they're finding that our brains are actually changing all the time. Like, the biology and the landscape of our brain is changing based on the thoughts that we think. And so that's good news, bad news. So the good news is, if you don't like where your life is, you can change the way you think, and it will change your brain, which will change the outcome. But it's not going to happen overnight, because chances are you've been thinking, hurtful things or destructive things or whatever it might be for a long time. And so it does take a bit of time, but it's really, really powerful. They're now helping people with learning disabilities and traumatic brain injuries, like, completely get recovered by consistent, intentional exercises, and just really focusing on how they think and what they think about. So it's really powerful stuff.
Another question. How would you help someone that is not ready to work through their loss?
Well, I wouldn't. I wouldn't help someone that is not ready, because you can't ever force. It's like anything else in life. You can't force someone to receive a gift. They have to receive it, right? And actually, the best learning is, I can't teach you anything. It's the learning that you discover for yourself that's actually going to stick and have lasting change. And so, as it relates to grief specifically, I always say there's a time for support, and then there's a time to recover. And those are kind of two different things, and it's different for everyone. I equate it to, again, if you had a broken leg, you would need crutches and you would need support for a little bit. But then at some point you would have to engage in physical therapy, and you would actually have to work those muscles, and it would be painful and all that kind of stuff. So what I do is the physical therapy, right? And for some people, they want to stay in that support place, for 3 weeks or 3 months. Only they know when they're ready to actually tackle it. But I firmly believe, healing doesn't happen until you decide to do the work and tackle it. A whole lot of people can get busy, or they can numb themselves and do a whole bunch of other tactics, which aren't healing. But if you actually want to heal and recover, you're going to have to go through the work and learn the skills to actually move through it and move on.
Very good points. Any other questions, folks?
Yeah, these are great questions. If
Someone
we don't have
asked
questions,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I would love to hear, since I couldn't see their faces, I would just love to hear one nugget that people took out of the talk. What was their favorite step, or what is one action item that they're going to take after leaving this webinar? Like, what was a takeaway for them?
Turning your pain into purpose.
That's awesome.
Someone said they loved the 5 steps.
Great.
Recognizing your strengths.
That is good.
I loved when you said you need to be patient and flexible with yourself. That really
Yeah.
resonated with me. That was good. Recognize your strengths. Healing is your responsibility. Stuck with somebody.
That's good.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have become intimately acquainted with my limits. Turns out I have limits. Before this, I just always was go, go, go. But I have learned that I have limits, and I have learned that it's not good when I try to go beyond my limits. So I'm much more aware of my limits. I'm much more protective of myself and my time and my energy, because I understand that my emotional energy and physical energy is a finite resource. It's not infinite. There are limits to it. And so I take much better care of myself now than I ever did before.
A lot of comments that are really positive. Asking ourselves what makes us feel better and focusing on that. Someone loved the map maker questions. Believing you can recover. She loved step 2, the path protector. Someone said that they lost one of her best friends to suicide 1 year ago today. This
Oh,
information
wow.
has been inspiring, gives me hope. Step 1 has resonated with me tonight.
Oh, wow.
Someone said the info that it takes 21 days for a thought to stick and 63 days for that thought to become a habit. And then someone said their daughter took her life almost 5 years ago. This is exactly what she needed to hear tonight.
Oh, good.
Much needed.
Well, then we have done our job. Like, that warms my heart so much. I'm so glad that if you found any ounce of empowerment, encouragement, inspiration, because it takes all those things, right? Recovering from grief is the hardest things that I've ever had to do. And it takes courage, it takes strength, it takes patience and endurance. It is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and you have to keep at it and be consistent. And so I'm just inspired by all of you that showed up here tonight, seeking help and support for yourself and just getting after it, just doing the hard work that it is to recover. And we all need you to, all of us need each other to be healthy and well and the best versions of ourselves. So I'm thrilled. It warms my heart, everybody that was here tonight.
Yeah, the comments keep coming in. I'm going to make sure you get these, Kelly. They're really good. We have had a few people ask if this is being recorded and what we're going to do with that recording. We're going to talk about that due to your power outage. We probably want to edit it down just a little bit.
Shoot.
If you do send it, it'll be a few days. We'll see how that goes. We're going to talk about how we'll use that recording. I'm so glad that this has helped so many of you. We had over 50 of you in here. And so it's touched a lot of people, and I think this info will stick. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Kelly, for sharing what you've shared, for being vulnerable and open and willing to share what you've learned as you've recovered from your grief. And it's so inspiring, so full of hope. For the attendees, as I mentioned before the webinar, you will receive an 8-question survey. So please take a moment to give us your valuable feedback. And with that, we will say goodnight and take care, everybody. Thank you again, Kelly. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.